And now, to kick things off this morning, our first speaker is this guy sitting over here with the bald head and the beard, Guy Hamilton-Smith, who is on our board of directors. Guy is an attorney. Let me tell you, you're in for it today, because with our schedule changes now, this is attorney day, because you're going to get two attorneys today. So Guy is on NARSOL's board of directors. He is, I guess, I'll back up a step before I get into nuts and bolts of him. I want to highlight one of the things I think is most important about Guy. Those of us who have been active in the cause for a long time have seen countless examples of people who really struggle when they get out and get on the registry, and they have trouble finding housing, they have trouble finding jobs, and it really is a challenging time for people. Well, the man you're about to see and hear this morning should be an inspiration and a role model, because 20 years ago, he was sitting in a penitentiary in Kentucky. Jail, okay. So upon his release in 2007, he was placed on Kentucky's sex offender registry. But through desire, determination, and pure tenacity, he completed a law degree at the University of Kentucky. And he worked several years in criminal defense law offices, and is now a practicing attorney in Washington, D.C. So, he is a member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, of the Law and Society Association's Division on Punishment and Society, and JustLeadershipUSA's Impact Council. So Guy now focuses on civil rights and criminal defense cases, with a particular interest in sex offender registries. He is also a prolific writer, and he's published a whole bunch of articles and in a variety of different publications, and he even publishes his own newsletter called Little Red Dots. So I will let him explain what Little Red Dots is about if he wants to. Without further ado, I give you Mr. Guy Hamilton, Esquire, to lead off our conference this morning.
Well, thank you for that, very generous introduction. I'm not sure how much of an inspiration or role model I should be, but I am what I am. So I do have some slides. They are few in number, but I'm not sure if, are they, not yet?
Not yet. I'm working on it.
Okay. Well, thank you. So I bet everyone is wondering what I'm going to be talking about. I'm also wondering the same thing. So it's going to be an adventure for all of us, because I was asked a couple days ago if I wanted to speak this morning, and I said sure. I was originally supposed to speak Sunday, but I said, the problem is I was going to use Friday and Saturday to figure out what I was going to say on Sunday. So most of my kind of chewing on what I'm going to be talking about this morning was spent in the car, driving here. And it occurred to me that this is a really special conference. I think that NARSOL and all these advocacy organizations, AXOL, WAR, they're all really special because they provide community for a population of people that is so often deprived of community. And I think community is really important for a lot of reasons. So I was thinking about that this is a particularly special conference because we're having it anyways. We had to overcome all these obstacles and hurdles and threats and blah, blah, blah to get here, to be here. You all in this room have overcome, those barriers to be here listening to me, run my mouth this morning. So this is special also because I think we're at this really weird time in this country more broadly. Because while we have the freedom of speech in this country, it's apparent that everybody hates the freedom of speech. No one likes it, right? Because the thing about the freedom of speech is that it protects the right of people that you don't like to say things that are wrong. But the other side of that coin is it also protects the right of people you do like me, I hope, to say things that are right. Again, I also hope I'm right. So it's give and take, it's yin and yang. But again, as I said, no one likes it. We're at this point in our country where, for years, folks on the left, for example, thought it was a great idea to get people on the right fired from their jobs for saying things they disagreed with, that they didn't like. And now, people on the right said, you're right, that is a great idea. And so they're doing the same thing. But, like I said, the problem is we need freedom of speech, right? We need it, not just as a legal principle restricting the government from impeding people's speech, but we also need it as a cultural principle in this country. The idea that we can resolve our differences and we can debate and we can find the truth of a matter by using our words, not bullets, not threats, not bombs. And I think it's important because this is where, if I had a slide, I would pull up. Actually, I had a great little comic. Maybe we'll get to see it, maybe not, I don't know. But this is where I'd pull up the First Amendment, the text of the First Amendment. And so if you look at the first 10 amendments to the United States Constitution, it's the Bill of Rights, and look at where they started. When they, these old dudes in a bunch of wigs, I guess they were probably wearing wigs. I didn't pay attention in history class, but let's just assume they were, but that's not important. What's important is when they sat down and they put pen to paper or quill to parchment, they started with number 1, First Amendment. And what was it? It wasn't guns. It wasn't search and seizure. It wasn't even about quartering British troops. And that was a much bigger deal back then. It was speech. Well, the text of the first, it actually starts with religion and then speech, but you get the idea. Religion is maybe not as big a deal now as it was back then, but speech is still pretty big. I'm doing it right now, unfortunately for everyone who can hear me. And so there are also freedoms that are inherent within this notion of the freedom of speech that are necessary to exercise it. And one of those is the freedom of association. And that's what we're doing right now in this room. Getting together. We're sharing ideas. We're fighting for something. We're having community. So we're doing that, and we're doing that thanks to the tenacity of the folks at NARSOL who pulled this conference together. So I'll give them a round of applause for doing that. Okay, so these ideas about free speech, it occurred to me about, finding your voice, finding your community, and fighting to keep them. They were the ideas that kept kind of bubbling up for me as I was driving here and as I was staying up late trying to figure this speech out, and also as I got up early to do the same thing. And it occurred to me that not only are these things, I think, necessary for a free democracy, they're necessary for advocacy movements, they're necessary to become fully human, to stay fully human. And it also occurred to me that these were also the things that were indispensable to me on a personal level in my journey to become a lawyer. And then were also, incidentally, the subject of my first federal appellate argument earlier this year in Cincinnati. So what I can really talk about is my favorite thing in the world to talk about, is me. I knew I could overcome and find a way to make this about me. As Don said, I'm directly impacted. I come to this work, both as someone who has been harmed and someone who's caused harm. very much in the vein of, being a human being. And I guess in how to tell my story and how to loop it into this topic, I guess the place to start really is with church, which is probably an odd way to kind of start. It's not really at the beginning, but it is kind of at the beginning of the reasons why these topics became important to me and allowed me the space to, well, get to, where I am today. So when I was in law school, I wasn't religious at all. In fact, I was the opposite of religious. But I had a mentee who was very religious, and we would argue all the time about religion. And one day I had a spiritual experience. It's a whole nother story. But I asked her, would you take me to church? And she said, sure. So she brought me to the church that she went to. And I liked it. And I wanted to start attending. But, I had this past. Of course, I went to law school by way of the criminal justice system. I wasn't interested in becoming a lawyer. It never occurred to me until I was sitting in court waiting for my own case to be called and listening to the arguments of attorneys for other people who were accused of crimes. And I began to get really interested in those cases, even though I was terrified about going through the process myself. I asked my lawyer one day, can you become a lawyer with a felony? And he said, sure. I know lots of lawyers with felonies. I don't know how true that was, but I took him at his word, and I went out and got an LSAT book. I started studying, and thankfully I didn't go to prison. I went to law school instead, which is, I guess, a different kind of prison. But anyway, point of the story, though, so I had this past, I had this conviction, when I was a teenager, I developed this really unhealthy relationship with internet pornography, and some of the images that I downloaded were not legal. And when I was arrested, I was grateful. I was grateful for my arrest because it was that part of my life was really troubling to me, and I didn't know how to escape it. I didn't have the courage to ask anyone for help. And then I got that courage because I was sort of, I've said this before, but really the freest I ever felt was in a pair of handcuffs in an interrogation room. So, but I had this conviction, and of course the registry and all the shame that came with that. And at the time that I started going to church, there was actually a debate raging in my local paper's op-ed section about whether sex offenders should be allowed in church. And so I was like, I don't even know if they're going to let me, come here. So I talked to my priest. I asked my priest after lunch. And I talked to him. I told him the whole story. I told him about, my experiences of being raped as an 8-year-old boy, and of course my conviction. And, I just kind of have this whole sort of different mass of things, and I was just so afraid, and I was so ashamed, and I was sure he was going to, just say, never talk to me again. I just remember him being kind of annoyed. And he just kind of looked at me and said, I don't see why you wouldn't be able to attend. You're no different than anyone else. So I started to attend. But I didn't tell anyone else about my past because it was like it's kind of a hard thing to talk about. So, but everyone found out in about 2014 when, so you go through law school and then you apply to take the bar exam. And in order to take the bar exam, or in order to become sworn in, you have to demonstrate that you have good moral character, which to a lot of people surprises them that there's a good moral character requirement for attorneys, but there is. And the Kentucky Supreme Court said, I did not have it. That's what they said in 2014. And I found out about that decision when an AP reporter called my office looking for me and asked if I was the same guy, Hamilton-Smith, that the Supreme Court just denied his bar application. And I was like, thanks for letting me know. And anyway, but he did what reporters do, and he reported, and it became like this. I was in the news cycle for like 5 minutes. And everyone at my church found out, you know? And that Sunday, you know, my priest called me on the phone, and I think he called me before Sunday, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, he called me, he let me know, hey, just want to let you know your story is out there. You know, people are talking about it. I just want to give you a heads up. And I said, well, okay, thanks. And, you know, that Sunday I faced kind of a choice. I could go to church, I could show up, or I could not. And, you know, I decided I'm going to go. So I went, and I remember I walked through the front doors, and I was just trying to avoid everyone looking at me. I just was looking down at the ground and just made a beeline to my seat. And I sat down and I closed my eyes. And then before long, I felt 2 people sit on either side of me. And I figured it was like security to throw me out. And I opened my eyes, and it was these 2, you know, sort of matrons of the church, these 2 older ladies, and that I knew well. And I thought that's a weird choice to throw me out, but you know, I'll just never forget. One of them leaned over to me and whispered in my ear, and she said, "We got your back." And you know, during the peace, you know, the part of the church service when people, you know, peace of the Lord with you, also with you, people kept coming up to me, hugging me, telling me that I was loved, telling me that I was in the right place. And that was, you know, a really holy moment. It was a really pivotal moment in my story, because that community enabled me to become more than my past, you know, to become more than any label that I bore, and to become, you know, just human, you know, a human being. And that in turn got me involved with doing advocacy work and through prison ministry, and working to help other people who are incarcerated for all types of crimes. So that's a kind of a part of the community piece of it. But there's something else that kind of happened around the same time that was also important. And that was during law school. So during my criminal procedure class, actually, state police were trying to have me arrested because they said that I was non-compliant. Because at the time, the law in Kentucky was that if you're on the registry, you have to report all your internet identifiers. And so I didn't know what that meant. So I decided, well, it's better to err on the side of caution. So I'm going to provide them with everything I can possibly think of. You know, my bank login, my Westlaw login, you know, anything and everything. And I went to my probation officer, and because I was on probation at the time, and I said, hey, Doug, you know, I need to report these. You know, what do you think? And he said, well, are any of these social media? And at the time, the law was also, if you're on the registry, you can't use social media. I said, no, they're not social media. And he said, well, we don't need to worry about any of that then. And I was like, okay, well, fine. And then I sent the same information to the state police, and they said, no, you have to register this. And I said, okay. I went back to Doug. I went back to my PO. I said, Doug, state police says I have to register this stuff. And Doug said, no, it's just social media. Don't worry about it. I said, okay. I tried. But state police was expecting to see all this updated registration information. They never saw it, so they assumed I was non-compliant, and, well, I found out during my criminal procedure class, of all places. Talking about an education. So, basically, there were, you know, these 2 law enforcement agencies that could not agree on what a law meant. And that is a classic void for vagueness problem. So, my best friend and I, in law school, we came up with this idea. And this idea was, well, if they're not going to let me take the bar, we're going to do a lawsuit. And we're going to do a lawsuit over this law, this internet identifier law, and also the social media law. This was in it's a case called Packingham, pre-Packingham days. And we were going to challenge it on constitutional grounds. And so, because they weren't going to let me take the bar exam, I figured, well, I still have, these two things that are, are we up? Yay! Can we go back?
Yeah. There's only one screen. That's why you're supposed to sit over here.
Okay, there's the First Amendment. Wait, let's back up one more. There we go. That's my comic. It's a lawyer saying, Your Honor, in an effort to ensure a fair trial, we move for a change of venue to the defendant's imagination. Just because I thought it was funny, and sometimes that's just how it be. Okay, you can go forward. And again? Okay, we'll stay there. So, and this is the Packingham case that I just mentioned, but we brought this lawsuit before Packingham was decided. And so the idea was that I didn't have my license, so I couldn't represent anyone else, but I could represent myself because I had education and training, and I had Article III standing. So that meant, we could bring a lawsuit. And that's what we wound up doing. And as it turns out, that lawsuit was actually how I wound up then becoming a lawyer in probably the most roundabout way possible. And so that is, sort of looping this back into the idea of the freedom of speech. Because I had believed, and also the Supreme Court eventually agreed with me and with Mr. Packingham, that there is a First Amendment right in accessing social media. And I had the big dumb idea of, if I won this lawsuit and I was able to access social media, that what I was going to do was I was going to do public advocacy work. I'd talk about my story, and I would advocate. And that in turn sort of started I did a Reddit AMA, I think on the day we actually won the lawsuit in 2017. And from there, I joined Twitter. What used to be Twitter is now X. And that started my, I guess you'd say, a writing career. And that wound up getting me a job with a law school, civil rights clinic, doing work on these issues. That and my writing career made me connections in D.C., where someone encouraged me, you should apply for the bar in D.C. And so I did. And it's a long story, but I got in. I got sworn in on April Fool's Day, 2023. So, it only took me about 12 more years than more. And also, social media connected me with other advocates. It connected me with other lawyers. It connected me actually with the lawyers who represented me in my bar admissions hearing. And it connected me with the client in my first lawsuit, as an attorney, which is over a Kentucky law that bans anonymity for people who are on the registry and on social media, which I think is just another way of trying to ban social media usage, especially in today's day and age. And so that brings us to, that's fine. I think we can stay there. This decision, this court case, Packingham versus North Carolina, which was decided in 2017. And I had to go back and reread this case for this federal appellate argument I did over this anonymity social media law. And I just really love this quote. This is from Justice Kennedy, who unfortunately also wrote Smith versus Doe, but hey, you can't get it all. So this is talking about North Carolina's law banning people who are on the registry from using social media. And it's a unanimous decision. And Justice Kennedy wrote, in sum, to foreclose access to social media altogether is to prevent the user from engaging in the legitimate exercise of his First Amendment rights. It is unsettling to suggest that only a limited set of websites can be used even by persons who have completed their sentences. Even convicted criminals, and in some instances especially convicted criminals, might receive legitimate benefits from these means, You get the idea, no. Even convicted criminals, and in some instances especially convicted criminals, might receive legitimate benefits from these means for access to the world of ideas, in particular if they seem to reform and to pursue lawful and rewarding lives. You know, and it occurred to me when I was preparing for my argument at the Sixth Circuit, like, that's me. I am especially convicted criminals, because this access to the world of ideas and of building community, both online and in person, is ultimately what led me to be able to have the ability to become a lawyer and now do the lawyering thing. And so I think that, you know, when I was thinking about what to talk about today, it just occurred to me that, like, you know, those two things, like my church community and then this lawsuit and all the journey that both of those things really put me on, highlighted for me in my personal life, in my personal story, the importance of that freedom of speech principle and the importance of community. Now, I think that punishment and accountability are important. And I think that's the purpose of, at least ideally, the criminal justice system. But this, you know, what we're here to talk about today, you know, the registry and, you know, also civil commitment programs, that's something else entirely. It's a punishment that denies even the opportunity or possibility of redemption. And I believe that when punishment becomes divorced from considerations of proportionality and mercy and of redemption, punishment becomes little more than a poison that diminishes us all, that makes us all smaller, makes our country smaller. So I think that giving people a voice and the space to use that voice helps keep us safe. It helps keep us free. Just as what Justice Kennedy wrote in Packingham about especially convicted criminals. And my belief on that point is informed by work that I've done on voting rights. You know, many moons ago, I co-authored a research paper on felony disenfranchisement, which is the practice that some states engage in of taking people's right to vote away once they have been convicted of a felony offense. And research that I co-authored found that it has an impact on recidivism, meaning that if you take people's right to vote away, states that do that experience more crime, more rearrest than states that don't. And a vote is just another way of having a voice. And silencing that has real consequences. You know, incidentally, that article was recently cited by the Fifth Circuit in striking down Mississippi's law on felony disenfranchisement. But then the en banc, the full Fifth Circuit, then reversed that decision. I got cited again. This time I was in the dissent, though, unfortunately. So I say all that to say that you know, this is a part of an ongoing project in this country, in the history of NARSOL and this organization, and in all of our own lives. You know, the future is unwritten for all of us. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're at a very interesting, precarious time in this country. And everyone hates the thing that we need the most, both as a people and as a country. And here we are, swimming in the deepest end of the pool. As my friend Glenn Martin has said, the people who are closest to the problem are closest to the solution, but furthest from power and resources. And if you're in this room And if you're listening to me run my mouth right now, you are a part of the least popular human rights struggle in existence. Perhaps the least popular one that there has ever been. We might have better odds in 1692 at an anti-witch burning meeting in Salem, Massachusetts. The registry impacts 1 million Americans and their spouses and their children. It costs untold hundreds of millions of dollars annually to operate, all to not do what courts and legislatures are very careful to say that it does: protect rather than punish. It diverts resources and attention away from solutions to ending the very real problem of sexual violence and into systems of perpetual punishment for people who have already been held fully accountable in the criminal justice system. It continually reincarcerates people for paperwork errors and pushes them into chronic homelessness and joblessness, all things that we know exacerbate crime, which is the thing that we ostensibly say that we don't want. We put kids as young as 8 years old on it, sometimes for life, and we are also the only place on the planet that does this. So in doing this advocacy work, we endure threats to our lives, to our livelihoods, and yet here we are today in this room against all odds. By availing ourselves of this space and this time to meet, to speak, to advocate, we are giving real life to the promise that the First Amendment holds, that the freedom of speech holds. So I am honored to be here and to have been asked to kick this thing off. Hopefully I have said something that is helpful, that you can use, that you can take with you. That is, I don't think I have any other slides. Oh, no, wait, I do have one more slide if anyone that has my contact information.
Put it up, but I will put it back.
There we go. Yeah,
Was there for a second.
well,
You had to be fast.
yeah, there we go. You can reach out to me if anyone has any questions, but I realize I'm not really going the full hour because I think an hour is just like a really long time for me to just get up here and like bore people to tears. So I'll be happy to take some time and answer questions if anyone has a question. Yes.
Go to the microphone, please.
Oh.
Microphones, please.
Oh, there are
Can't hear you otherwise.
there are microphones.
So we can hear you.
Okay. But thank you all for your rapt attention, and I'm glad we got through it without too much bloodshed. So, yeah, that's true. It's early.
Who raised their hand first?
I don't know.
Yeah, push it. Push the red button.
Red means go. Please go, Bumper. Please. Please.
Yeah, 3 people working on it. Is this one working over here?
I don't know.
Okay. Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Just go ahead.
Just yell.
Okay, I'm gonna yell.
Yell.
Guys hear me?
You can repeat it.
Okay, my question is, we received
I don't think it's there. It's on the digital one.
black strings, I'm gonna say now against some very powerful lobbyists and other groups. What do you think about forming a coalition with other groups such as NOW, National Organization of Women, FAM, Families Against Minimum Mandatory Sentences, ACLU? There must be at least 5 other organizations, if not more, because we could pull us and work together.
Sure. I mean, so the question is about what do I think about, building power by aligning ourselves with other organizations, more, some more mainstream criminal justice organizations like FAM, Families Against Mandatory Minimums, National Organization of Women, ACLU, so on and so forth. I mean, I think it's a great idea. And I'll also say that in the advocacy sort of journey that I've been on, some of my closest allies have actually been organizations that are focused on survivors of sexual violence, because they understand that this, that like the whole system of registries is not helpful. You know, what's going to be helpful are, you know, primary prevention strategies, also delivery of services directly to survivors, that sort of thing. As far as like more mainstream criminal justice organizations, I think the problem is that, you know, criminal justice reform in 2018, 2019 was more ascendant, and now I think everything is sort of on the back foot. And my, you know, just my opinion, my observation is that, you know, given that I think more mainstream criminal justice organizations and civil rights organizations like the ACLU are fighting to kind of, you know, quote unquote, keep what they got, this issue is just, it's harder to, it's more siloed. You know, I think it's kind of like, it's up to us to figure it out. You know, because I've also seen, you know, instances of criminal justice reform pushes where, you know, this issue, registrants or sex offenses more generally, get sort of thrown under the bus in terms of criminal justice reform. So I think it's a great idea. I'm not sure how likely or realistic it is, but I'd also love to be proven wrong. I mean, I'm wrong all the time. So, yes.
This one's working.
All right.
All right. So Instagram. Way back in the day when I was first put on Facebook, the sheriff tried to add me. I denied his request, and then my Facebook was closed down. And then Facebook bought Instagram and WhatsApp and rebranded as Meta, and then my Instagram was shut down.
Right.
So I'm assuming it's just a policy carryover, long story short, which is speculative, I know.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other kind of part of the freedom of speech issue that is, I think, really makes this issue a much more difficult advocacy position, because that's right. Meta, who owns, you know, Facebook, Instagram, Threads, WhatsApp, you know, they have a policy that is, if you've ever been convicted of a sex offense, that you're not eligible to have an account, and they'll terminate your account. Now, that's not, I mean, I have some ideas about this from a lawyer perspective, but that's beside the point. The general idea is that they're not the government. So even if you have a First Amendment right to access social media platforms don't have to let you on, which makes it sort of very difficult, because those are like some of the biggest social media platforms that are used for advocacy and political organizing that exist. So yeah, that's the long answer to your question. That, yeah, my understanding is it's just a, you know, it's a policy choice that Meta has made.
So I wasn't aware that it was like if you've ever been convicted, because my deal is I'm off the registry now, and so it's like, all right, sweet, I can apply to get my accounts back, but they're like, you need an account to appeal this decision, but I'm locked out of it because they disabled it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, you'd have to look at the exact language of it, if it's and how they implement it. I mean, they're also pretty. I think they're also, Meta is also very. They're kind of selective in whether or not they enforce that. Like, because, you know, I think Mike Tyson has a very popular, you know, and he should, you know, and Mike Tyson should have a Facebook account, an Instagram account, and whatever. But he was, of course, you know, convicted of a sex offense back in the day. So I think, you know, if you can make Meta a lot of money in terms of driving advertising dollars, you know, I think they'd overlook it. But otherwise, I think you'd have to just look at the policy, you know, the exact wording of it. I'm not offhand sure. I believe it's convicted as opposed to whether or not you're on the registry, but, you know, it's up to them. You bet. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you. Okay, so while I recognize like the part of like freedom of speech, and I really like respect that you kind of see it from, you know, allowing both sides to express themselves. With what happened to me, sometimes you know, a lot of, you know, you see these vigilante groups, and they they take it into their own hands
Sure.
to threaten organizations that people are working for. And I don't know what in the law at least allows to protect those people from that it should be within the judicial system's capacity to ensure that that person is safe to the community. And I don't know, I'm just curious what your thoughts are about that.
I mean, not all speech is protected. There are certain categories of speech that aren't protected by the First Amendment. Like harassment, threats, child pornography, obviously. There are some other categories of speech that are, defamation. Those things are unprotected. So to the extent that something like that rises to the level of harassment, I mean, it could potentially be, a crime, or it could lead to, a civil suit. But I mean, I think that ultimately, I think that what that is essentially, kind of a heckler's veto sort of thing that we, experienced earlier this year, that Narsal experienced. And, I think that is, against the principle, the cultural principle, at least, of freedom of speech, because I think that both political sides have engaged in that sort of strategy. I think much to our detriment, and I think that like I said, I think that people on the left kind of set out this blueprint for if someone does something or says something that we find that even I may find disagreeable or offensive, to get them fired, from their job. And now that seems to be sort of like just in the culture as being that's what you do when someone says something that you don't like. And so I think it's a very topical. It's a very topical issue. I'm not sure that there are particularly easy answers with it, but yeah, those are kind of my scattered, half-formed thoughts. If those are helpful. Yes, sir.
Question I have is there's a lot of private entities. There seems to be more and more that are listing people on the registry, and when somebody gets off the registry, they want to be delisted from them because it lists their occupation sometimes,
Sure.
their home address and everything like that. What suggestions would you have as far as pushing these private entities? Do they have a right to post that information even though you're off the registry, or could you comment on that, please?
It could give rise to. It could, if you're off the registry and they're saying that you are a sex offender right now. That could give rise to some kind of legal liability for them in terms of defamation or something like that. I think the broader problems that we lack, and Dr. Sarah Lageson does a lot of really good work on this. She's written a lot of really great research on it, but I think the broader problem is that we lack sort of robust privacy protections especially with respect to criminal justice data. And so this whole cottage industry has grown up with, data brokers around criminal justice data, and they commodify it. They make a profit off of it by selling it to consumers. And so I think the solution, in my opinion, would be, we need sort of more robust privacy protection legislation with respect to, potentially stale criminal justice information. Because if the idea is like public safety as opposed to just shaming people, well, if someone was convicted of a crime 30 years ago and they haven't been convicted of another crime since, it just becomes sort of like noise for the average consumer. Like they can't distinguish or determine if someone is a risk or someone is not a risk. But also, I think, given the current state of Congress, I don't necessarily see that. The government is shut down as we speak, so I don't necessarily see that as a realistic possibility. But it's not totally my area of expertise, but that's my 2 cents.
Congress shut down about 20 years ago.
What's that?
Congress shut down about 20 years ago.
Did they? And they haven't opened up since.
Hey, guy, this is from the live stream. It says, how is Guy approaching advocacy on registry issues during this period when so many civil liberties are under attack? How do we get prioritized or fit into the bigger movements?
You know, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think we are, you know, I believe in the Constitution. I like all the amendments. I like them all. I mean, even the Second Amendment. And I don't really like guns personally, but I believe in the Second Amendment. I've also long said that I wish that people would get as upset about violations of the other amendments as they did the Second Amendment. You know, like people getting outraged over the police searching someone's home without a warrant. Like, you know, what a different country we would live in. But anyway, I think that it's hard. You know, I think that it's hard. You know, we are kind of living, I think, in unprecedented times in many respects in this country. And I think we have, you know, our sort of corner of, you know, there's a lot of injustice in the world. And we have this little sort of patch of it. And we can do what we can here, while also, you know, working, I think, to the broader mission of helping others, you know, with their issues, where we can, when we can. And I mean, I think that means you know, rejecting authoritarianism. I think that means, you know, fighting for other people, you know, against the government when you can, even if it's not related to this, issue. And how do we align ourselves with other organizations? I mean, I think that's just sort of that. I mean, I've been, I guess, working in this field of advocacy for, I guess, you know, a little over 10 years, and not like forever. But my experience has been it's very difficult. You know, it's very difficult because this is sort of like a toxic issue, you know, culturally. I mean, even if we have the data, the science, you know, to back us up, it's just still very difficult. So I don't know. I mean, I hope other people have better ideas about how to do that, because I don't. But that's my answer. If anyone has does anyone else have a question? You can also, I'll be around this weekend, so feel free to chat me up or email me. Absolutely not. That was it. You already asked it.
Is this on now?
Yeah.
I just wondered, Guy, could you just tell people what any cases you're working on right now and what the issues are and what your prognosis is?
My prognosis? Don't ask me that. Don't ask.
Gonna win them all.
You know, I used to work for a boss who bet on horses. And anytime I come into his office, if he was watching a horse race and he had money on a horse, his horse would lose. And so he started calling me El Gato Negro, the black cat. So I'm not going to give my prognosis, but you know, I think what I can share of the cases I'm working on, I can talk about. There's two. I mean, there's that law that I had mentioned that said if you're on the registry, you have to use your full legal name on social media platforms. We got an injunction. Basically, the federal district court said, yeah, that's probably unconstitutional under the First Amendment. Anonymous speech is important. I mean, it's been critical in the history of unpopular or persecuted sex groups of people to be able to advocate. Even some of our founders, you know, wrote under pen names. They wrote under pseudonyms, you know, so they didn't use their full legal name. So anyway, the district court said, yeah, it's probably unconstitutional, and the Attorney General said, we're appealing it. So then we went up to that's where we went up to the Sixth Circuit, and back in April, I hopefully did a good job at oral argument. I had kind of a hot bench, which is I got a lot of questions from the bench, and that was, I mean, it was a really fun experience. Like I said, I hope I did well. And we were just waiting on a decision from the Sixth Circuit about whether or not the lower court was right. And then also we're in the middle of briefing at the Eighth Circuit. This is a case in Missouri over the registry. It's kind of a big case, you know, ex post facto, Eighth Amendment, due process, equal protection, also First Amendment challenges. We did win one issue in the district court on the First Amendment issue. Lost everything else. So we just filed a brief in the Eighth Circuit, I think maybe 6 weeks or so ago, and we're waiting on the response from the Attorney General. I am hopeful. I'm hopeful. I believe in the case. I believe in our argument. Who knows what's going to happen? So we'll have oral arguments at some point in, I believe, St. Louis. And yeah, so those are kind of two of the bigger issues that I'm working on I can talk about.
Broad internet monitoring for people on probation, particularly when it proactively violates privilege? I've not heard it framed that way personally.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, like certain, I haven't heard of that. Like, I haven't heard of efforts to challenge broad monitoring on if you're on probation or supervised release or parole, because as many people probably know, your Fourth Amendment interests in privacy and against search and seizure are reduced if you are obviously incarcerated, for one. Two, if you're on probation or parole. Normally, probation officers would need a warrant to come into your house, but they don't need a warrant if you're on probation or parole. And it's the same thing with your electronic devices, computers, and stuff like that. As far as how it implicates privilege, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. That is an interesting question. I just hadn't come up in any cases that I've had to work on. So yeah, I just don't know. Rather than try to work out my thoughts about it up here, I'm just going to say, good question. Ask a lawyer. I don't know. No one? Okay. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for letting me kick us off.